Slovakian countries, European nations. This is a very big meeting. Here's the press
Good afternoon.
conference.
The Secretary General will brief you on the extraordinary meeting of NATO Foreign Ministers, and then we'll have time for questions. Secretary General.
Good afternoon. We have just finished an extraordinary meeting of NATO Foreign Ministers. Russia is carrying out a brutal and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, which NATO and the whole world condemn. This is the worst military aggression in Europe for decades. With cities under siege, schools, hospitals, and residential buildings shelled, reckless actions around a nuclear power plant last night, and many civilians killed or wounded. The days to come are likely to be worse, with more death, more suffering, and more destruction. As the Russian armed forces bring in heavier weaponry and continue their attacks across the country. At our meeting today, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Kuleba addressed his NATO counterparts, and allies expressed their solidarity and deep respect for the courage of the Ukrainian people and armed forces. We had warned for many months that President Putin was intent on invading Ukraine. That is why NATO allies made tireless efforts to find a diplomatic solution. At the same time, we made clear that Russia would pay a very high price for renewed aggression against Ukraine. Russia is paying that price now. This is President Putin's war, one he has chosen, planned, and is waging against a peaceful country. We call on President Putin to stop this war immediately, withdraw all his forces from Ukraine without conditions, and engage in genuine diplomacy now. NATO allies have stepped up support for Ukraine, helping to uphold the country's right of self-defense as enshrined in the UN Charter. Today, ministers addressed our immediate response to the crisis and the longer-term implications for Euro-Atlantic security. We have already strengthened our deterrence and defense, on land, in the air, and at sea. Allies from North America and Europe have sent thousands more troops to the eastern part of the alliance. We are deploying the NATO response force for the first time, and we have over 130 jets at high alert, and over 200 ships from the high north to the Mediterranean. We will continue to do what it takes to protect and defend every inch of NATO territory. NATO is a defensive alliance. Our core task is to keep our 30 nations safe. We are not part of this conflict, and we have a responsibility to ensure it does not escalate and spread beyond Ukraine, because that would be even more devastating and more dangerous, with even more human suffering. NATO is not seeking a war with Russia. The Kremlin's ambition is to recreate a sphere of influence and deny other countries the right to choose their own path. So ministers discussed the need to support partners who may be at risk, including Georgia and Bosnia-Herzegovina. Russia's aggression has created a new normal for our security, where fundamental principles are contested through the use of force, and we face the threat of conflict for years to come. There is much at stake: how we organize relations between states, whether democracy or authoritarianism prevails, and ultimately what sort of world we want to live in. Ministers agreed that NATO's relationship with Russia has fundamentally changed for the longer term. But we remain committed to keeping channels for diplomacy and deconfliction open, to avoid any unintended escalation, misunderstanding, or miscalculation. There is one lesson we can already draw from this crisis. To keep our nation safe, we need North America and Europe standing together in NATO in strategic solidarity. At this dangerous moment, no country and no continent can go it alone. President Putin has failed to divide us. NATO is more united, more determined, and stronger than ever. We're also working closer with like-minded partners. Today we were joined by the European Union, as well as Finland and Sweden. In response to Russia's aggression, we have decided to strengthen our coordination and information sharing with Finland and Sweden. Both countries are now taking part in all NATO consultations about the crisis. And this afternoon, I will join a meeting of EU foreign ministers to address the crisis and our response.